They expected a weak man, someone tame, someone broken by the weight of diplomacy and bureaucracy. They expected the last human envoy to arrive with bowed shoulders and an apologetic tone, maybe a few rehearsed lines about peace, unity, forgiveness, the usual trash the council loved to pass around like stale wine. But I stood tall, steel-backed, jaw locked. And when I walked into the great hall of the Galactic Federation, where 27 of the most powerful species in the known universe sat smug in their floating thrones, I didn't flinch. Not once. Not even when the Granzor Lords hissed at my presence, or when the three-mouthed Tervoxian Prime rolled its tongues and declared that I smelled like a dying world. They were right about that, in a way. Earth was dying. Not from famine, not from disease, but from what they did to us. I stood before them in my uniform, black and red. No medals, no fancy insignia, just the patch on my right arm. A cracked earth split by a sword. The chair of the council, a slippery snake-skinned thing called Virex, leaned forward and gave a performative sigh. "Ambassador," he said with mock gravity, "we are honored by your presence. Shall we begin?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around. I let my eyes land on each species that had a hand in it. The bombing of Sydney, the orbital blockade around Mars, the death squads on Europa. All of it done under the thin veil of containment. Containment of the human threat. Containment of our potential. They said we were unpredictable, dangerous, emotional, primitive. And yet here they were, wearing silk and scales and blinking with 8 eyes, while I stood there, the only one in the room who knew what real war looked like. Finally, I spoke. "No." The word bounced through the chamber, caught in the silence like a punch in a funeral. Virex blinked. Excuse me?" I said no. No negotiations, no forgiveness, no more speeches. A few gasps. A Telnari minister stood, her antennae twitching. "This meeting was convened under peace protocol, human. Your presence here is bound by Article 17 of the Accord." "Your accord," I interrupted, "is nothing but ink spilled on the corpses of my people." I could see them shifting now, getting uncomfortable. "Good. You came to our system with promises. Trade, alliance, unity, and when we refused to bow, you sanctioned us. When we stood our ground, you occupied us. When we fought back, you called us terrorists. You taught us what your peace really means." The Trenvok warlord chuckled through his gills. "And now what? You threaten us? With what? Your planet has no fleet, your colonies are gone," I said flatly. "Yeah. I buried my wife on Titan's ashes, watched my son choke under a Martian blockade, but don't think for a second that means we're done." I reached into my coat and pulled out the data chip, tossed it on the table like it was trash. Virex recoiled. "What is that?" "Proof. 17 dreadnoughts, 2 rebuilt shipyards, and a weapon you've never seen before, built in the shadows, hidden in the storms of Jupiter, tested on the moon of Chiral 9. "That moon is uninhabited," someone muttered. "Not anymore." The chamber erupted into noise, accusations, threats, warnings, but I didn't care. I stepped forward, let my voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You thought you'd broken us. You thought Earth was finished, but we were never as fragile as you believed. You took everything. And in return, we built something you can't buy or steal or suppress." My hand curled into a fist. "Hate." And then I said the line, the one I came all this way for. "The time for war has come." Silence. They looked at me like I was mad, like I was bluffing. But I saw it. The crack in their confidence, the twitch in Virex's eye, the nervous ripple through the council. Because deep down, they knew. Humanity had stopped begging. We had stopped bleeding. Now it was their turn. I left the great hall the way I entered. Alone. No guards, no honor escort, no applause. Just a trail of fear in my wake. Behind me, the council had exploded into chaos. Some screamed about violations, others demanded immediate sanctions. Virex was trying to regain control, hissing orders like a snake stuck in its own coil, but none of that mattered. They could talk. They always talked. We were done listening. The diplomatic shuttle that brought me in was long gone. It was never meant to return. I took a private jump craft hidden deep in the lower docks. Black market tech, illegal cloaking field, untraceable warp. Paid for in blood. Flown by someone I trusted with my life. Someone who had just as much to lose. When I climbed into the back seat, he didn't say a word. Just lifted off the moment I shut the hatch. His name was Ryan. Not a soldier. Not even military trained. He was a miner before the war. One of the few who survived the orbital collapse over Ceres. His left arm was cybernetic. Built by hand after a Federation drone crushed the real one under 6 tons of steel. "You said it?" he finally asked, as the ship jumped into FTL. "Yeah," I said, breathing out. "I said it." He nodded once. No celebration, no pride, just grim understanding. "You're sure this is the path?" I looked out the viewport. Stars were stretching, bending, racing past like ghosts of dead light. Somewhere out there, Earth still turned on its axis, quiet, wounded, waiting. "They gave us no choice," I said. "We didn't head home, not yet. Our destination was a dead zone. No star charts marked it, no trade routes passed near. Just a frozen void between systems, a place the Council considered irrelevant. That was their mistake, because in that void, humanity had hidden something monstrous. Project Emberfall. The Federation thought they destroyed it 2 years ago. They came in full force. Orbital artillery, ground sweeps, even planet burners. They left it in ruins and claimed victory. What they didn't know was that Emberfall wasn't a place. It was a seed, a network, a ghost. We rebuilt it underground, beneath ice, beneath rock, beneath their arrogance. And when Ryan dropped us out of FTL and the moon of Halcor came into view, I felt that weight settle in my chest. This was it. This was where the reckoning began. As we approached, the dark side of the moon lit up. One massive artificial iris opening from the surface like a giant mechanical eye. A landing bay unfolded from the crust, steam rising in thick spirals. The station below was shielded from scans, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Inside, it was chaos disguised as purpose. Humans in dark uniforms moved in tight, practiced patterns. Engineers, soldiers, scientists, all silent, all sharp-eyed, the kind of people who had lost everything and found purpose in revenge. No one saluted me. No one bowed. We didn't do that anymore. Respect wasn't earned with titles. It was paid in scars. Colonel Draven met me at the inner gate. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His right eye was an implant, the kind that glowed faint red even in daylight, the result of a Federation sniper shot during the Mars evacuation. He never covered it up, called it his reminder. "You stirred the hornet's nest," he said by way of greeting. "Good. About time they felt something." He walked beside me as we entered the war chamber. Massive digital projections filled the room, ship schematics, planetary defenses, intercepted transmissions. At the center was the Emberfall fleet, 17 ships, just like I said, built from scrap, stolen parts, and human ingenuity. Ugly, brutal, efficient. "What did they say?" Draven asked. "They laughed," I said, "right before they started panicking." He smirked. "They'll stop laughing soon." "We ready?" He didn't answer, just turned and gestured to the center table. One motion, and the room dimmed. A single red dot blinked at the edge of the galactic map. Corvus system, he said. Federation fuel hub. Lightly guarded, all defense automated. I nodded. Then that's where we begin. No demands? They've already been made, with blood. Now we answer. The Emberfall fleet didn't roar into battle. It moved like a predator. Quiet. Precise. We didn't have the numbers to fight their navy head-on. Not yet. But we didn't need to. We weren't here to win a battle. We were here to start a fire. Corvus fell in 36 minutes. No grand speeches. No flag raising. Just silence. Then a burst of fire as the control station erupted. The orbital drones turned on each other, reprogrammed mid-strike. Our virus worked perfectly. We took the depot. We didn't hold it. We broadcast it. Every comm channel in the Federation lit up with a single transmission. My face, lit red by the fire behind me, speaking the words they thought they'd never hear from a human again. We are not your slaves. We are not your subjects. We are not your mistake. This war is not for peace. It's for memory, for the ones you buried, and for the vengeance you earned. Back on the Council homeworld, they were scrambling. Our intelligence feeds showed panicked messages, emergency meetings. Virex personally issued a bounty on my head. 10 million credits, dead or alive. They froze all human assets in outer systems, recalled several patrol fleets from neutral zones. It was chaos. And that's exactly what we wanted, because chaos exposes cracks, and cracks break empires. But not everyone was cheering. In the underground command room, a private channel lit up, encrypted, unauthorized. I answered it anyway. The face that appeared on the screen made my stomach twist, wrinkled. Cold eyes, a scar down the side of his cheek that I once gave him in a fight we never finished. General Harrow. Once the highest-ranking human in the Federation's auxiliary forces. A traitor, a survivor, a bastard who did what he had to just to stay alive when Earth burned. "You've doomed us all," he said without emotion. I leaned forward. "No. I've given us a reason to live. There are millions of humans still within Federation borders. Colonies, outposts, families. You just painted a target on their backs." "They were already targets," I snapped. "You know it. I know it. The only difference now is they'll die with purpose, not in silence." He looked tired, older than I remembered. "You think this war will end with victory? There's no end. There's only ash." I stared at him through the screen, then let it burn. That night, I sat alone in my quarters. There were no windows, but I imagined Earth. I tried to picture the forests I once walked through as a boy, my father's voice, the smell of firewood, the touch of my wife's hand the night before she died in the Mars collapse. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't afford it anymore. Every tear now was a distraction. Every memory was a weakness. I couldn't be that man again. I had to be something else, something the galaxy feared. A symbol of what happens when you push a species to the edge and then keep pushing. My comms blinked again. This time it was Draven. "We've received word. The Turvox Empire has issued a preemptive strike order." I closed my eyes. "Where?" "New Titan. A small colony, barely 15,000 humans, mostly children and farmers. No weapons, no defense." I stood up. "Then we hit back harder." "Where?" I didn't even hesitate. "Prime Turvox. Hit their capital dome. Level it." "Civilians?" "There are no civilians in war." He nodded. "No arguments, just war." And so the fire spread. New Titan burned, and then Turvox burned more. For every attack they made, we hit back with twice the fury. They had ships, we had rage, they had fleets, we had memory, they had power, we had nothing left to lose, and that made us dangerous in a way they never understood. The attack on Prime Turvox was fast and merciless. Our fleet didn't show up in formation or announce itself. There were no warnings, no ultimatums, no attempt at diplomacy, because they had made it clear diplomacy was for the species they respected, and they had never respected us. So we came in cloaked. 3 ships, 1 purpose. The moment we dropped cloak above their capital dome, the sky turned black. Their planetary defense grid kicked in too late, scrambling in confusion, expecting pirates or insurgents. They didn't think humans would be that bold, that reckless, that suicidal. They thought wrong. The first blast came from the Bloodwake, one of our retrofitted dreadnoughts. It wasn't elegant, just a brute slab of metal with enough firepower to crack a small moon. The cannon cut through the sky, vaporizing their eastern dome in seconds. Glass, steel, and bodies went up in a pillar of flame. They screamed. We didn't. Because we remembered New Titan. We remembered the bodies pulled from rubble with no limbs, no faces. The way the Federation left them there, calling them regrettable losses in a containment effort. We didn't call this attack an effort. We called it revenge. By the time the smoke cleared, 40% of Prime Turvox was gone. We didn't wait to be intercepted. We jumped out, gone like ghosts. Back in Emberfall Command, there was no celebration, no cheers, only a cold silence as the data came in. Death tolls, footage, audio intercepts of Turvoxian officials crying into their comms, begging for help that never came. Colonel Draven didn't say a word as he studied the screen. I stood behind him, arms crossed, feeling the weight of it settle on my chest. Not guilt. Never that. Just reality. 3,000 civilians confirmed, he finally said. They confirmed 14,000 dead on New Titan, I replied. Only difference is, we didn't pretend we were sorry. He turned and looked at me, something hard behind his one glowing eye. This won't be the end of it. We shook the hive. Now the swarm is coming. Let them come. You keep saying that, he said, stepping closer, voice low and sharp. But you and I both know we don't have the ships, we don't have the bodies, we don't have the planets. We're fighting a galaxy with barely enough tech to keep our air filters running. Then we make every shot count. He didn't argue, just nodded once, turned, and walked away. That's the thing about soldiers who've lost everything. They don't need hope, just orders. The backlash came faster than expected. Federation Command declared humans an uncontained threat species within 48 hours. That meant total war, not just against Emberfall, against every human settlement still under their control. They launched a galaxy-wide purge. I saw the footage within hours. Hidden colonies bombed from orbit, refugee ships turned to ash mid-flight. In one particularly sick broadcast, a Federation captain executed 5 children on live holostream to send a message. That message was received, loud and clear. So we sent one back. Her name was Admiral Selira, Federation hero, commander of the 11th Strike Fleet, decorated 16 times for pacification of human colonies. She wore her medals like trophies. We lured her into the brim-shade expanse with a distress signal, an old Earth trick. She brought her entire fleet. She never left. What the Federation didn't know was that Emberfall's tech division had developed something new, something forbidden. A gravity weapon, built from black hole fragments collected from the ruins of a collapsed mining station on Vega 3. We called it the Maw. It was unstable, unreliable, and completely lethal. We unleashed it the moment Admiral Selira's flagship entered range. The gravity spike pulled her fleet into itself like paper down a drain. She tried to run. She screamed orders. She begged. We intercepted her comms and broadcasted her last words across 12 sectors. You animals, you monsters, you're not supposed to... then silence, then nothing. But it wasn't all victory. For every blow we landed, we paid in kind. One of our refueling stations on Kepler's Edge was destroyed in retaliation. 1,000 human workers, gone in an instant. Another rebel outpost on Dorsai 9 was betrayed by a sympathizer and wiped off the map. And one of our best operatives, Joran, was caught and executed on broadcast. They made him kneel. They made him confess. Then they made sure everyone saw the look in his eyes before they pulled the trigger. No fear, just defiance. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my quarters and watched the footage over and over. Memorized every twitch of his face. The way he clenched his jaw. The way he didn't give them the satisfaction of a scream. He had once been a farmer, just a quiet man with a quiet life. They killed his family during the siege of Luna Prime. After that, he became something else. And now he was gone. Another piece of the cost. Another name added to the list I kept in my head. A list that was getting too long. Eventually, the council stopped pretending. Virex himself went live on galactic broadcast. I watched from the war room as he stood before his people, wrapped in ceremonial robes, eyes gleaming with that familiar mix of arrogance and fear. Humanity has crossed the final line, he said. This is no longer a matter of control. This is extermination. He meant it too. He had no idea what we'd become. That was his mistake. He thought extermination was the end. For humans, extermination was just the beginning. We accelerated the war, hit faster, hit harder, fuel depots, data relays, communication satellites. Every time they came close, we disappeared. Every time they thought they'd cornered us, we slipped away and took another chunk of them with us. But we were bleeding too. Our people were stretched thin. Our med bays were full. Our engineers worked 20 hours a day just to keep our weapons online. Every ship lost was a ship we couldn't replace. Every fighter pilot downed was another name we whispered into silence. And still, we pressed on, because there was no turning back. We had set the galaxy on fire. Now we had to walk through the flames. One night, I found Rian sitting outside the repair bay, alone, staring at the wall. His cybernetic arm was twitching. Another glitch. The kind of thing we didn't have time or parts to fix. He noticed me coming, but didn't move. "You here?" he asked quietly. "What?" "Federation hit Freeborn Station." I stopped. "How bad?" "Everyone. Gone. No survivors." I sat down beside him. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat there, listening to the hum of the station, the silence between the walls, the sound of a war that never rested. "I had a daughter on Freeborn," he said finally. My throat went dry. "I didn't know. Didn't talk about her much. Didn't want to think about what might happen." I nodded. He looked at me, eyes hollow. "Was it worth it?" I didn't answer right away. Because if I did, if I answered too quickly, too coldly, I'd lose the last piece of humanity I still had. But I couldn't lie either. So I said the only thing I could. "It has to be." He nodded. And we sat there, in the quiet, both of us pretending we believed it. Later that week, I walked back into the comms room. Our agents had intercepted another council meeting broadcast. Private, high clearance. I watched it alone. Virex was raging, slamming his claws into the table, screaming about human sabotage, traitors among their ranks, the failure of the extermination protocols. Then something interesting happened. One of the council members, an old, shriveled thing from the Karen species, said something that made my blood run cold. "Perhaps," he hissed, "we underestimated them because they had nothing, and perhaps that is exactly what makes them unstoppable." The room went quiet. For the first time, I saw it in their eyes. Fear. Not of our weapons, not of our numbers, but of us, what we were willing to become. what we had already lost, what we were willing to do. That's when I knew. The war wasn't just winnable. It was inevitable. We wouldn't stop. We couldn't. Not until there was nothing left of the Council. Not until every dome, every fleet, every empire that raised its hand against humanity was reduced to dust. We were past diplomacy. We were past redemption. We were rage. We were memory. We were war. There comes a point in every war where survival becomes second nature and morality becomes a liability. We had crossed that point. We didn't speak about it, but everyone in Emberfall Command felt it. The numbness creeping in, the silence that lingered too long between orders. We used to mourn. Now we counted bodies and moved on. Each loss folded into the larger strategy. Each name a number, a result, a data point on the warboard. But some losses hit differently. This one broke something in me. It came at 0400 hours. Draven came to my quarters himself. That never happened. I was reviewing comms intercepts, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep. The war didn't wait for rest, and neither did I. He didn't knock, just stepped inside, jaw tight, holding a datapad. I already knew it was bad. "Say it," I said. He hesitated, for the first time in years. "They found Haven," he said. The room went cold. Haven was a deep sleep colony, a last resort sanctuary built into the crust of a rogue planet on the far edge of dead space. Non-combatants only. Families, children, scientists, no military presence. We'd buried it under 20 layers of encryption, and still, they found it. "How?" I asked, my voice like sandpaper. He handed me the pad. Federation logs. Intercepted footage. Drone video of the attack. I watched it. A grainy clip, fire pouring from the sky, the shield dome collapsing. Screams. Then came the worst part. A woman, holding a child in her arms, running through ash, her eyes looking straight into the drone camera before it cuts out. I recognized her. I had her photo. She was my sister. And the child, God, the child, was my nephew. Gone. Just like that. They knew. Somehow they knew. This wasn't just strategy anymore. This was personal. Draven put a hand on my shoulder. "We don't have to respond right away. Let it sit. Plan. Breathe." I looked up at him, eyes burning. "No," I said. "We hit back now." The next target wasn't military. It was a cultural node, the Citadel of Zhev, home of the Federation's Grand Archive, a neutral site, a library planet. Billions of years of knowledge stored in vaults and memory banks, untouched by war out of tradition. We shattered that tradition. I handpicked the strike team, not soldiers, executioners. Ryan flew the ship himself. He didn't speak during the jump, didn't need to. The look in his eyes said enough. We landed under stealth and walked into history like ghosts. The Zhevian curators didn't resist. They didn't beg either. They just stood there, robes fluttering in the wind, staring as we planted the charges. One of them approached me, old and fragile, scales peeling at the edges. "You're not like them," he said gently. "You still have time to stop." I didn't speak. I pressed the detonator and watched the greatest library in the galaxy vanish in fire. There would be no history left for them to write, only ours. After the Zhev strike, the Federation lost their mind. They issued a galaxy-wide red order, authorization to kill all humans on sight. No trials, no prisons, just executions. Camps were set up on fringe worlds. Propaganda flooded the networks. Humanity, the infestation must end. I watched the broadcasts. I made sure to watch them. Every image they pushed out was a lie. Mutated photos, fake footage, doctored screams. They made us monsters so they could justify what they were already doing. But we didn't need help being monsters anymore. We embraced it. They wanted extinction? Fine. But we'd drag them into the grave with us. Intel came in that one of their key command centers was stationed on the moon Viridin 6, hidden inside a mountain range, shielded from orbit, guarded by ex-council mercenaries. Too tight for a full assault. So we went quiet. Just 3 of us. Me, Ryan, and Kova, a sniper with a vendetta that made mine look mild. We infiltrated through the vents, old school, crawling through metal, hearing boots above us. No air, no room, just sweat, nerves, and the sound of our breathing. We reached the central hub. 2 guards, no more. They were laughing, talking about Haven. One of them joked about how the kids screamed louder than the adults. I shot him in the throat, watched him gag on his own blood. Kova took the second one out with a blade to the spine. No sound, no mercy. We planted explosives on their systems, rewrote their data feeds, and wired the reactor to blow. Before we left, I carved something into the control panel with my knife. You lit the fire, now burn with it. Viridin 6 ceased to exist an hour later. But even fire needs fuel, and ours was running low. Our fleets were tired, our pilots hallucinating from lack of sleep, our engineers patching ships with literal scrap metal. Draven pulled me aside. "We're not gods," he said. "You keep pushing like this, we'll break before they do." I stared at him. So we slow down? Let them breathe? Let them regroup and erase another colony? No, but we start thinking about after. There is no after. He slammed his fist on the table. That's the problem. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I looked at him and said the quiet truth. If we stop now, we'll become the footnote in their history books. One more rebellion crushed. One more uprising they dissect and file away. But if we finish it, if we go all the way, they'll never forget us. We'll be the scar they can't erase. He nodded slowly. That was the deal we'd made with Hell. Not to win, but to be remembered. Then came the transmission. A surprise. From a Federation admiral, not a warning, not a threat, a request, face to face. "No weapons, just words," she said. Her name was Admiral Kane. She was the one who greenlit the Haven strike. I agreed. Not to talk, to look her in the eyes before I ended her. We met on a derelict station, floating between systems, neutral ground, no guards, just her and me. She was tall, armored, decorated, and she had the audacity to smile. "I heard your sister was on Haven," she said. I didn't move. "Did you enjoy Viridin 6? She asked. Still, I said nothing. She leaned forward. "You think you're winning? You're not? All you've done is bought time. Every world you burn is another reason we'll make sure your species is wiped from existence." "You already decided that," I said. "We're just making it hurt." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not fighting for humanity. You're fighting for yourself." I smiled then. A cold, dead smile. "I am humanity." Then I walked away. Left her there. I didn't kill her. Not yet. She'd die when the war was over, when there was no one left to bury her. Back at Emberfall, a message awaited me. From a hidden human colony. One we hadn't heard from in over a year. They'd survived. 15,000 strong, undetected, growing food, building, teaching children. They weren't warriors. They were the last future we had. I stood there, staring at the message. It hit like a punch to the gut. A piece of us still lived, still hoped. And that was dangerous, because now I had something to protect again, and I knew what came next. If we didn't end this war fast, they'd find the colony. They always did. We couldn't hold the line forever. We had to break it, and to do that, we had to go for the throat. So we set our eyes on the final target, Council Prime. The Federation's capital world, the heart of the machine, heavily fortified, impossible to breach, suicide, Perfect. I gathered the commanders, showed them the plan, a three-pronged assault. One chance, all or nothing. Draven stared at the display. You think we can win? No, I said, but we can end it. He nodded. I'll start prepping the fleet. As he walked away, Ryan came up beside me. If we do this, he said, none of us are coming back. I looked at him. We already didn't. There's a moment before every last stand when time slows. The sky holds its breath. The metal creaks a little louder. You start to feel your heartbeat, not in your chest, but in your teeth. You're not afraid, not really. Fear is too distant a feeling. What you feel is stillness. A cold, waiting silence like the kind that settles just before a blade drops. That's what it felt like aboard the Revenant, Emberfall's flagship, as we dropped out of FTL near the edge of Council Prime. We didn't come alone. 10 ships, that's all we had left that could still fly and fight. They weren't pretty. They weren't symmetrical. They were monsters of war built out of scrap, hatred, and memory. Each one carried the names of the dead carved into its hull: Mars, Europa, Titan, Haven, Freeborn. This wasn't a fleet, it was a funeral procession. And I was the one who lit the pyre. The Federation had fortified Council Prime like it was the last sanctuary of existence. 30 orbital platforms, thousands of automated turrets. Minefields stretching across space like webs. No ship had ever made it through the inner defense ring. We weren't supposed to. This wasn't a siege. It was a message. One last act of defiance so brutal, so loud, so unforgettable that it would echo across centuries. So they'd never again look at a human without remembering who we were when everything was stripped away. Draven stood beside me on the bridge. You sure about this? No, I said. But that never mattered before. He gave me one of those soldier's smiles. Hollow, heavy. All ships in position, the comms officer called out. Final confirmation, Commander. I took a breath. Let it burn through my lungs. Begin. We split into 3 assault waves. Wave 1, the Revenant, Bloodwake, and Wraith hit the outer platform grid. We didn't try to dodge, didn't try to hide. We charged straight into the jaws of their defenses with every gun firing. Wave 2, Hellbound Dirge Ashes, came in from below, targeting the relay satellites and shield nodes. If we could blind them, even for 30 seconds, we'd have a window. Wave 3, the final card, would follow if that window opened. Black Echo and Juno's Blade, both fitted with the last Ember-class fusion cores. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, enough to send a message that no one could ever erase. The first barrage hit us like a divine hammer. The Wraith exploded almost instantly. A direct hit from an orbital lance tore her in half, scattering debris across the void. No screams, just static. Just another name for the list. The Revenant shuddered as we plowed forward. Alarms blared. Fire burst from vent ducts. Hull breaches reported in sections B through D. I heard Ryan shouting in engineering, trying to reroute power to the shields. He was coughing up blood last I saw him. Still working, we returned fire. Draven was everywhere. Barking orders, coordinating flanks, rerouting strike paths. His right hand was burned raw from an exploded console, but he didn't even look at it. That was the thing about us. Pain stopped mattering a long time ago. Hellbound took out the southern relay. We watched as half the orbital turrets stuttered, then went dark. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Now, I roared into the comms. Wave 3, move in, blow the door off its hinges. Black Echo and Juno's Blade dove through the opening like avenging angels. Federation fighters scrambled to intercept, but they were too late. We saw the flashes. Felt the pulse through the void. Then silence. a gaping wound torn into the side of Council Prime. One fusion core had detonated below the capital spire. The other drilled straight into the planetary crust before rupturing. Our 2 ships, every crew member on them, were gone. But so was half the city. "Surface impact confirmed," the comms officer whispered, voice shaking. Draven stood behind her, silent. I stepped forward, leaned into the mic, and opened every broadcast frequency available. All sectors, all species, every language. They needed to hear it. From us. "This is humanity," I said, voice raw. "You came to our worlds. You took our families. You told us to die quietly. You erased our history and expected us to thank you." I paused. Let the blood boil in the silence. "But we don't go quietly. We never have." I looked out the shattered viewport, where pieces of bloodwake drifted like bones through the stars. "We are not your servants. We are not your mistake. We are the reckoning. And this war doesn't end with our silence. It ends with yours." I cut the comms, and then everything went black. A Federation destroyer had broken through our flank. The hit came from above, right into our upper hull. The impact threw me across the bridge. Metal tore through my side. I felt it, white hot, slicing straight through flesh. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Draven was screaming at someone. Fire was licking the walls. Systems failing. The bridge flickered in and out of emergency power. Then I saw Ryan. His face was half burned, one arm gone. He dragged himself up beside me. "You don't get to die yet," he rasped. "Why not?" I whispered. He grinned, lips bleeding. "Because I still owe you that drink." Then he collapsed. Dead. Just like that. No ceremony, no last words, just silence. I don't remember much after that. Medics pulled me out. The ship didn't hold. We had to abandon it. Only 4 of us survived from the Revenant. Draven was one of them, but he was done. After we were extracted by ashes, he sat in silence. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. I saw the look in his eyes. Something broke in him too. He'd been fighting for so long, he forgot who he was outside of the war. Now, sitting in a cold medbay, surrounded by corpses and silence, he was just a ghost wearing a uniform. And maybe I was too. In the hours that followed, we watched as the galaxy reacted. The Federation didn't issue a statement. They didn't broadcast victory or retaliation. They went silent. Council Prime was bleeding. The seat of their power was shattered. Millions dead. Infrastructure ruined. A wound so deep they'd need decades to rebuild. And the whole galaxy saw it. Suddenly, other species began questioning the Council's leadership. A few declared neutrality. 1 or 2 even reached out to us, asking about peace, about coexistence. It was laughable. Too late for peace, too late for apologies. But it wasn't too late to finish the job. I returned to Emberfall. Not as a commander, not as a leader, just a man with blood on his hands and ghosts on his back. I walked the halls, saw what was left of us. Fewer now. Less chatter, less hope, but more fire, more determination. Every death, every loss had carved away the weakness and left only resolve. We weren't a resistance anymore. We were a force of nature. And nature didn't negotiate. That night, I opened the last message from my sister. I'd been too afraid to read it before, too busy pretending I could live without it. It was short. "You're doing the right thing. Just don't lose who you are, brother. Don't forget your soul." I closed my eyes. Too late. The next morning, Draven walked into my room. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I felt. He just tossed a datapad onto the table. "Targets," he said. I looked at them. Supply depots, military academies, fleet production yards, the final phase, a campaign of destruction, no survivors, no surrender. I looked up at him. You ready for this? His eyes were dead, but his voice was clear. I was born for this. And so was I. We were never supposed to win. That was never the plan. Victory was just a myth we told the recruits to keep them from falling apart. This wasn't about winning. It was about making them bleed, about making sure that when the dust settled, when the embers cooled, when the next generation opened their eyes, they would remember. Remember what they did. Remember what we became. Remember the name of the species they tried to erase, and failed. The smell of fire never leaves you. Even in vacuum-sealed stations and sterile war rooms, even through recycled air scrubbed 1,000 times, you still feel it in your throat. Ash. Blood. The quiet rot of something sacred that's been broken too many times. After Council Prime, that smell lived in everything. The Federation didn't collapse. Not yet. But it staggered. Badly. Their response was delayed, fractured, uncertain. Internal comms leaked across black market relays showed their panic. We underestimated them, again. Containment is no longer possible. This is no longer about rebellion. This is extermination. We agreed. Only difference was, we were the ones doing the exterminating now. Draven and I stood over the table in War Room Alpha. The lights were dimmed. No need for fanfare. Everyone present already knew the weight of what we were planning. A total strike campaign across the inner rim, targeting infrastructure, not cities. We'd tried to make our vengeance precise. Clean, in a way. But the Federation's lifelines ran through civilian networks, education hubs, power cores beneath farming colonies. There was no clean anymore. Draven spoke first. If we hit all 5 in under 72 hours, their fleet response time will double. Fuel restrictions, weapons shortages, internal collapse within weeks. And the casualties? I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer. I didn't press, because we'd both made peace with it. If they wanted to survive, they never should have targeted the children. The first target was Varnus Core, an orbital manufacturing ring above a mid-sized moon. We didn't go in guns blazing. We sent Kova. 1 sniper. 1 shot. She'd been quiet since Veridan 6. Said very little. But when she loaded her rifle and walked toward the launch bay, I saw it in her posture. That controlled rage, that surgical precision. She wasn't hunting soldiers. She was hunting a name on a list. 3 hours later, the orbital ring was floating debris. Not because she shot the reactor, but because she killed the only engineer who could stop it from overloading. And left. No trace. Just ash. Next was Linari Station, food distribution center for 7 inner ring colonies. We hacked their logistics feed, redirected supplies, starved them from within. When the Federation came asking why families were rioting on peaceful worlds, we sent them a message. Now you know how it feels. They called us monsters, but I didn't see them call themselves monsters when they glassed Haven. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th strike, we lost Dirge. Ambushed mid-jump. 37 lives gone in a flash of light. We retrieved no bodies, just black box data and a single comm log that cut off mid-scream. Ryan would have said they went out the right way, but Ryan was gone. And I couldn't lie to myself anymore. There was no right way to die in this war, just slower or faster. One night, while reviewing intercepted Federation comms, I found something strange. A council transmission, encrypted at the highest level, routed through the Omega sector, a dead zone. Curious, I followed the trace. It led to something unexpected. A meeting, secret, off-record, unofficial. Between Federation brass and a faction calling themselves the Ascendants. They weren't soldiers, they were elites, bankers, politicians, researchers, those who profited off both sides of the war. And now, seeing the Federation weaken, they were looking to cut their losses and offer us peace. I stared at the offer, my hands clenched. Peace wasn't a gift. Peace was something earned, and they didn't deserve it. I sent them a reply, a video feed. No words, just footage. Haven, New Titan, Veridon 6, Freeborn Station. Ryan's burned face. Kova holding her dead brother. A child's hand sticking out from rubble. Then I ended the feed, let them choke on silence. The fifth strike, Argelian Forge, wasn't easy. A full garrison protected it. Hundreds of drones, dozens of ships. Draven said we should hold off, regroup. But I couldn't wait anymore. I boarded the lead ship myself, took command. We jumped in under fire. Ashes and Juno's Echo took the brunt of the first assault. Shields cracked, hulls burning. We lost 75 crew in the first 2 minutes. But we made it. Broke their lines, landed strike teams inside. And as the forge began to crumble from our explosives, I stood on the command deck and made one last transmission to the Federation, to the galaxy. You tried to make us disappear. You tried to erase our names. Now we are the writing on your walls. When we jumped out, barely holding the fleet together, I finally collapsed. Not from wounds, but from weight. I was bleeding inside, not physically, not even emotionally, but spiritually. I couldn't look in mirrors anymore, because the man staring back at me didn't have a soul left to lose. That night, in the dark of my quarters, Kova knocked once and entered. She didn't speak. She walked over, sat beside me, and handed me a flask. I drank. So did she. We didn't talk about the war. Just silence. Just two broken humans clinging to the memory of what we used to be. Then she asked, without looking at me, "When does it end?" I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, maybe it didn't. Later, Draven told me they'd found the colony. The last one. The one that had survived untouched. 15,000 humans. Living, hoping, rebuilding. The Federation had found them. And they were coming. No negotiations. No threats. Just a fleet. Big enough to level a planet. We had 72 hours, that's all. I gathered the Emberfall Council. What was left of it. 5 men, 2 women, veterans, killers, survivors. I told them the truth. We can't outrun this. We can't hide the colony again. The Federation wants the last flicker of humanity gone. They didn't ask what the plan was. They only asked one thing. How do we stop them? We launched Operation Ember's End. A last-ditch, all-in counterstrike designed not to win, but to delay. We'd attack the Federation's forward fleet before they reached the colony, bleed them, distract them, give the civilians a chance to evacuate, scatter, survive. Maybe it would buy them a year, maybe only a week, but that was all we had. That was all we ever had. The next morning, I sat in the hangar, watching the strike teams gear up. No one smiled, no one joked. There was only silence, resignation, and fire. I looked at Draven as he checked his weapon. "Ready?" I asked. He met my eyes. I was ready the moment they killed my son. We leave in 3 hours. No backup, no return, no delusions. Just a fleet of broken ships, a crew of broken people, carrying the last embers of a species they tried to erase. We're not fighting for territory anymore. Not for pride, not even revenge. We're fighting so the last children of Earth can wake up tomorrow and still have a sun to look at, even if we don't live to see it. This isn't victory. This is vengeance. This is defiance. This is the end. But if we go down, we take the gods with us. The last jump was always the hardest, not because of the distance, not even because of the enemy, but because it was final. No fallback, no retreat. Once we lit the drive, there would be no turning around. Ashes, Juno's Echo, Black Fang, Broken Promise and Cradle. 5 ships still flight-worthy. Barely. We knew they wouldn't survive the battle. That wasn't the point. The point was time. Buy the colony 48 more hours. That was the mission. Give the children a chance to scatter into the stars before the Federation wiped out the last spark of Earth. We didn't plan for survival. We planned for impact. Draven stood on the bridge beside me. His face was pale from blood loss, a wound stitched too fast, still leaking under his armor. But he didn't slow down. Not once. Kova stood at the weapons station. Her left eye was wrapped in gauze, a burn still fresh on her neck. She refused a full medbay treatment. "They can fix it when we're dead," she said. I didn't argue. There was no time for healing now, only fire. The Federation's forward fleet was larger than we expected. 12 capital ships, dozens of cruisers, swarms of drones. They came through the black like a wall of steel and silence. The flagship at the center carried the banner of the High Marshal, Kane's direct replacement. We weren't facing bureaucrats this time. This was the execution squad, the exterminators. And they didn't come for battle. They came for finality. We came in from above. A high-angle warp jump dropped our ships directly into their formation. No formation, no finesse, just velocity and fury. Ashes hit their first cruiser head-on. The collision ruptured both ships and sent flaming debris into a nearby drone cluster, triggering a cascade of explosions. I didn't look away. I had known the captain of Ashes, Marn, a quiet man with a crooked smile who used to hum old Earth songs under his breath. Now he was vapor. Gone. Another ghost. We didn't cry. We fired. "Full spread," I barked. Kova unleashed hell. Every gun, every torpedo, every pulse cannon on Juno's Echo lit up the void. Red streaks tore across the battlefield, ripping into Federation hulls. A direct hit landed on a destroyer's spine, splitting it like a bone under pressure, but they responded fast. Drones swarmed us like locusts, thousands of them. Too many for our depleted gunners to handle. Cradle took the brunt of it. We watched as her shields collapsed, one section at a time. Then came the breach. She didn't explode. She bent. The hull caved inward like crushed aluminum before disappearing into fire. 400 dead in 6 seconds. And still we pushed forward. I barely noticed the wound at first. A console exploded next to me. Shrapnel caught my side. Blood soaked through my suit, but I couldn't stop. I kept barking orders, kept pressing forward. Pain didn't matter anymore. Only time. 2 minutes until drone net collapse, Draven yelled. "We've almost broken through." Almost. Almost wasn't good enough. Then came Black Fang. She was the smallest of our ships. Fast. Brutal. Wild. Her pilot, Roke, was a psychopath with a death wish and a personal vendetta. Federation assassins had killed his wife during the siege of Europa. He never got over it. He was never supposed to. Roke took Black Fang straight into the center of their fleet, weaving through drone swarms, letting their ships open fire and dodge just close enough to bait them. Then he did it. He turned off his transponder, shut off comms, and dove headlong into the heart of their flagship. The impact was seismic. The detonation, nuclear. The core of the Federation's forward command ruptured like a heart punctured mid-beat. Kane's replacement was on that ship. So were 5,000 of their top fleet officers. All gone. Roke didn't scream. He didn't say goodbye. He just died the way he lived, bleeding into the enemy's teeth. The battlefield went quiet for a second after the blast. Even the drones paused, like the entire war had flinched. Then came the retaliation. They turned everything on Juno's Echo. We were the last ship standing. "Evasive," I shouted. "All power to engines." But it wasn't enough. The damage was too deep. One of the cruisers clipped our port side with a direct plasma strike, Half our systems went dark. We lost life support in sections B through F. The lower decks were gone. That's where the medbay was. Draven looked at me. We can't hold them. I know. He pressed something into my hand. It was a memory crystal, encrypted. What is it? The coordinates, he said. To the backups, the ones we didn't trust even you with. My heart stopped. You kept them? He nodded. Even if we fail here, they have to know we tried. We set the beacon. A one-time translight burst, a signal, encoded and compressed, fired deep into the black, aimed at the last human colony. A warning and a message. Run. Scatter. Live. The bridge shook violently. Kova's console exploded, sending her flying. She hit the wall with a sickening crunch, but somehow crawled back to her post. One eye gone, fingers burned black, still fighting. Target the relay ship, she croaked. We go out taking their comms with us. I staggered to the command chair, blood in my mouth. My hand hovered over the ignition for the final strike protocol. A self-destruct sequence hardwired into every Emberfall ship. We never used it, until now. I opened a private comm, the Federation's emergency channel. They answered. The face on the screen was some admiral I didn't know. Didn't care. He looked proud, like he'd already won, like we were insects crawling through our last breath. You've lost, he said. I smiled. You haven't won. Then I pressed the button. Light filled the void. Not a blast, a scream. Juno's echo ripped itself apart from the inside, taking the entire relay ship and 2 nearby cruisers with it. The shockwave tore through the formation, shredding dozens of drones, blinding their internal scans. It wouldn't stop them, but it would delay them. 48 hours, maybe more. That was all we ever wanted. I didn't expect to survive. But when I opened my eyes, I was still breathing. Emergency bulkheads had sealed just before the core went critical. Draven was dead. Kova was unconscious. I was bleeding out. But the ship was still drifting. A ghost in the black. One last ember, flickering in vacuum. In the silence, I crawled to the comms station, manually bypassed the wrecked systems, opened the last channel we had, and recorded one more message. To any human still alive out there, this is not a call for vengeance, not anymore. We did what we had to do. We fought. We bled. We screamed into the darkness, and now, we pass the torch. You don't have to be like us. You don't have to become monsters. You just have to remember who we were, what we lost, why we fought. We were humanity, and when they tried to erase us, we made damn sure they'd never forget our name. Then I shut the comm off and let the silence take me. The silence was thick, the kind that wraps around you like a shroud. There was no hum of systems, no voices, no orders barked through comms, just the faint, choking rattle of the emergency oxygen pump still ticking in the wreckage of Juno's echo. I don't know how long I drifted. Minutes, hours, days. Time stopped meaning anything. The pain in my side had dulled. Blood loss, probably. The skin around the shrapnel had gone cold. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. My fingers trembled with every breath. Kova lay across from me in the dark, still breathing. Barely. The emergency stims had kept her alive long enough to patch her burns, but her eye, her ribs, the way she wheezed, I knew. She wouldn't survive another hour, and I didn't know if I would either. But that was fine, because the signal had already been sent. Somewhere out there, past the broken fleet, past the burning wreckage, past the shattered moons and dead suns, they would receive it, the coordinates, the warning, the truth. The last remaining colony of humanity, 15,000 lives holding on to hope like a dying flame, now had a chance. A small one, a stupid, desperate, almost meaningless one. But sometimes that's all it takes. My final act wasn't heroic. It was slow, clumsy, one hand dragged across scorched metal, fumbling toward the beacon control. The console sparked when I touched it, but the light blinked green. The message had gone out, and that was enough. I leaned back, stared through the cracked viewport. The stars out there didn't care. They never did. They'd watched Earth burn. They'd watched colonies fall. They'd watched men and women like me turn into ghosts of what we used to be. They'd seen worse. They'd see worse still. But if even one of them, just one, still carried the story of what we did here, then we didn't die in vain. Kova stirred. Her voice was a whisper. Did we do it? I looked over. Her face was swollen, blackened, barely human, but her eyes, her one good eye, still burned. Yeah, I said. We did. She closed her eye, breathed once more, then didn't again. I didn't look away. She'd earned that much. A warrior. A killer, a survivor, a sister, gone. I was alone again. But this time, it didn't feel hollow. I'd carried the weight for so long. Hatred, anger, purpose. Every step had been another march into fire. Now, with no one left, nothing left to destroy. I felt light, empty, yes, but free. The ship's systems gave out 6 hours later. Life support failed. Lights went dark. The viewport frosted over. I leaned back in the chair, felt the cold wrap around my bones, and waited for it to end. I expected nothing. No afterlife, no voices, no gods waiting on the other side of the vacuum. Just sleep. But fate had one last twist. The rescue ship wasn't Federation. It wasn't Emberfall. It wasn't any species I recognized. They called themselves the Wayfarers, a neutral trade collective that had stayed out of the war. Smugglers, salvagers, cowards maybe. But they had picked up the beacon. And they came. They pulled me from the wreck. My blood frozen, my lungs nearly collapsed, my heart barely ticking. They kept me alive. For some reason. I woke up a week later in a med bay, cleaner than anything I'd seen in years. Artificial sunlight poured through the glass. I was wrapped in heated sheets, IVs pumping something warm into my veins. The first thing I saw was a young boy. Human. He stood at the foot of the bed, wide-eyed. I thought you were dead, he whispered. I tried to speak, but my throat cracked. Not yet. He ran out of the room, yelling for the doctor. I laid there, blinking. It wasn't over. Not yet. The captain of the Wayfarer ship, a tall, bird-like alien with eyes like silver coins, entered hours later. We heard the signal, he said, pulling up a projection of my transmission. We've never seen the Federation afraid before. They're not afraid, I rasped. They're angry. There's a difference. He tilted his head. Maybe. But you made them bleed. And that is something no one else has ever done. I didn't respond. He continued. You know what's left of them? No. They're eating themselves, fighting among their own ranks, colonies rebelling, trade routes collapsing, assassinations. They're still breathing, but they're choking. I nodded, slowly. Good. The Wayfarers took me to the colony. I didn't ask where it was. I didn't need to know. I just needed to see it. And when we landed, I wept. It wasn't a city. It wasn't a civilization. But it was alive. Children playing in the dust. Men and women building shelters from recycled scrap. Engineers working on small ships. Doctors training apprentices. Teachers writing on old digital slates. A spark. Not a fire, but a spark. And that was enough. They didn't know me. They didn't recognize my face. They'd heard of the Emberfall War. They'd seen the scars left behind, in stars, in maps, in stories passed around fires. But I wasn't their hero. I was just a name, a shadow, the one who screamed into the void so they could whisper again. And that was fine. Heroes don't need statues. We just need survivors. I spent my last years quietly. My body never fully recovered. The shrapnel was too deep, the nerves too frayed. But my hands still worked. My mind still burned. I helped build, taught what I knew, trained a few who wanted to learn how to fight, not for revenge, but so no one could ever take what we'd rebuilt. I wrote, too. Not memoirs, not propaganda, just truth, so they'd remember. Before I died, I made one last request. A small monument, not grand, not shining, just a stone, carved with names, the names of the ones who burned so these children could grow. Kova, Dryven, Ryan, Roke, Marn, the civilians, the colonies, the lost, all of them. And one line at the bottom. We were the spark. You are the fire. I died in my sleep, peacefully for once. No alarms, no screams, no war, just silence. And stars. They buried me under the stone. And maybe, centuries from now, someone will touch that name and wonder who I was. But it doesn't matter. Because I wasn't special. I wasn't chosen. I was just a man who had nothing left and chose to fight anyway. This was humanity. Broken, beaten, betrayed, and still breathing.